Hi, I'm Mike, and welcome to Retro Boost. We are talking once again about the brand of controllers, Retro Fighters. I've talked about a couple of Retro Fighters controllers already, 3 different ones, to be exact. The Brawler 64 Wireless, when I compared it against the Tribute 64 Wireless, two very good options for wireless N64 controllers. And then again, when they released their wired multi-purpose Genesis Sega Saturn controller, which was wired, the Brawler Gen 2-in-1, and then another one with their PlayStation controller, the Defender, which you can use on PS1, PS2, PS3, Switch, PC, and PlayStation Classic. Quite the varied controller. So there's a couple more models I still wanted to talk about. One that I've had for a long time, and I want to kind of go over a little more briefly and like the more star of the show, which is the Brawler 64 V2 wired. Now, I don't own any of the V1 controllers as far as I'm aware. I've always been buying the wireless ones in their V2 era, but I've never gotten one of the wired ones before. There were a couple sales back in November, so I was able to acquire a couple more controllers for my collection, namely the Extreme Green wired V2 Brawler 64. So this is the one that I want to kind of put some attention on today, but the other one I want to briefly mention is the Ultra 64 edition of the Brawler 64 wireless. The word 64 is being used a lot in this video. So these are the two controllers I want to talk about today, because they are both good options for aftermarket controllers for the Nintendo 64, and they're both very different, wired, and some of the things we'll get into. And there's a couple of things that are pretty unique about the Ultra edition specifically that are pretty cool to call out. So we're going to be talking about these two controllers today. If you find the video helpful, please consider subscribing. It's also the best way to help me grow the channel. But let's get started. We'll start first with the Ultra 64 edition Brawler 64 wireless and get into what makes this one special. So what's the story here? It's a Retro Fighters Brawler 64, but it's all sleek and black looking. Ooh, fancy. So this is the Ultra edition of the Brawler 64 wireless. I keep wanting to say Elite. The word Elite comes to my mind because I keep just like subconsciously picturing like Xbox's Elite series controllers for whatever reason, because it's also black and kind of like gray, silver accents. It's confusing me. But this is more interesting backstory for this controller. So the idea behind the Ultra 64 edition is that this design is kind of based after the promotional kind of pre-release images of what the Nintendo 64 was before it launched. Back then it was called the Ultra 64. So here it is, the hypothetical recreation of the Ultra 64 controller. It's wireless and it's black and it's cool looking, and it also has the rounded controller gate, which is really interesting because the default, N64 hardware had that octagonal style gate, as do the other Brawler 64 controllers, both wired and wireless. You can actually swap out the gate in this controller. You can swap the default hexagon, octagonal one, whatever it is, pretty sure it's octagonal. You can swap out the octagonal one for a rounded one to get yourself a very different feel. I was worried that there would be like a weird performance difference between the two, but just testing around with Mario 64, I actually didn't have any trouble swapping between one or the other. It was equally responsive with both situations. I did quite good. Very cool. And I do say, after playing with it a lot, I do prefer the rounded gate. That's what I have on it now, what I've been using to get footage with since. I do really like the rounded gate design. It works quite well. Other than that, it's all the same things that Retro Fighter Brawler 64 wirelesses, long title, already have. It's rechargeable via USB-C. We got 2 Z triggers on the bottom, shoulder buttons on the top, and then your face buttons with the same kind of texture and feel as the other Brawler 64 family of controllers. So whatever complaints I have of the other controllers are still valid for this one. So like, for example, you can't like swap the triggers because like, playing a game like say Star Fox, I would love to have my rolls on the same altitude versus top right for right roll and bottom left for left roll. Just me. The Tribute 64, you can actually do that. So that controller has like what I like to call Star Fox mode built into it. And also no support for the rumble packs. The controller itself does not have any kind of vibration to it, seeing I mean, you could like technically plug in the rumble pack into the receiver and make your console vibrate, I guess. But the the controller itself does not have that. But that's not a huge thing. I mean, I never really pined for that feature. I didn't have a rumble pack growing up, so I don't have like the nostalgia for it. It's a cool accessory, but not one that's that's required. So, all in all, interesting controller. I think it has a cool aesthetic to it. Very, very modern looking with its color accents, and the rounded controller gate does make it feel even more like a more modern solution versus the other controllers already were. I do like it. Pretty awesome. The wireless Retro Fighters controllers in general, I do like quite a bit. I had some issues with like connectivity with the original one that I was playing with, having a lot of sync issues and it was losing its signal. I don't know why that was happening. Sitting in the same position, same distance from the console with this controller and the other one that I got, I don't have those problems. All in all, very good controller. The Tribute 64 is another one worth checking out. I have the link to that in the description if you want to see how that controller works and handles. Another great option for someone looking for a wireless N64 controller. But this one is also pretty awesome. So that's the Ultra Edition in a nutshell. A lot of the same things as the other controllers, but with this new kind of alternate color design and the rounded controller gate option. Very cool. Let's move on to our other controller. Okay, let's move on to the star of the show, the Brawler 64 Wired Edition. I've never had a wired N64 controller from Retro Fighters before. This is the Extreme Green Edition. Pretty extreme. That's cool looking, I like the color. So the immediate first big difference with it being wired is the presence of the accessory port for memory packs or the rumble pack to go into. That means that this is the one N64 Retro Fighters controller that you can get force feedback with the rumble pack through. Since rumble is not built into the wireless ones, this is the one that can do it. So you can plug the rumble pack in there and you're good to go. Secondly, because of that extension being there, the controller has a slightly different kind of feel to it. So I would consider myself to have medium-sized hands, I guess. Holding this controller kind of properly, my fingers are kind of butting up against the extension there where the accessory port is. Someone that has really big hands may find this controller to be somewhat uncomfortable, I guess, depending. If you're the kind of person that was a fan of the Microsoft Duke controller, if that was your controller, you probably don't want this one. You probably want to go with one of the wireless ones instead, since that port's not going to be there to hit your fingers against. Otherwise, though, all the same design choices are here that the wireless ones have. The way the Z triggers feel, the face buttons, their texture, and of course this one's colored versus the black and gray Ultra Edition being. So this one's got more of that style to it. It's definitely a controller that pops out a lot more with its color decisions. It's nice. All in all, pretty great. We have the hexagonal controller gate as opposed to the Ultra 64's option to swap for the circular one. No real performance difference. And that's a good thing because, it gives you the option, but one's not inferior. It becomes more of a choice, which is nice. Because I played all the same games with these two controllers as I was doing this video. So Mario Kart 64 didn't have any problems drifting with the R button on either one, or pulling off little mini turbos with the stick back and forth, platforming with Mario 64, and then Star Fox 64 as well. No issues that I can say are the controller's fault, whether I was using the regular controller with its hexagonal gate or the Ultra Edition with the circular gate. No problems or issues that I can blame on the hardware, which is good. That's what you want to see. If I'm screwing up, it's because I'm bad at the game, not because the controller sabotages me. And obviously, since this is wired, you'd have no issues with, losing signal or having to recharge it. That'd be another advantage there to the wire design. No maintenance, basically, with this one. Although the batteries in the wireless editions of the Brawlers are quite good. They're I think 10-hour batteries, recharges with USB-C, very convenient. I haven't ever had any signal loss issues since that first video. I don't know why, but that controller just lost signal 3 or 4 times in a 10-minute span. Whereas ever since then, that that same controller and another two that I have, the Ultra and a purple one, have not had those issues. I've been very happy with them since. And obviously this is wired, so what could possibly go wrong? Well, nothing really. So all in all, fine. I think the wired edition is a great controller. Everything about it I do like. I do still wish you could swap the shoulder buttons. If R could become Z, that'd be like the best thing for like a game like Star Fox 64, the Tribute 64. You can do that. I lovingly refer to that as like Star Fox mode. It'd be cool to see that kind of macro come to the Retro Fighters Brawler series in some capacity, but you do other cool things too, like the turbo button ability, which it is really fun to use the turbo button to just like mow down bosses in games like Star Fox with that A button being pressed so fast. It is pretty cool, not gonna lie. But yeah, that's kind of the Brawler 64 wired, like in a nutshell. It's a fine controller. A lot of the same things I already said for the wireless applied to this, because the design is the same, minus the wired and the inclusion of the ability for accessory packs on board. So pretty awesome. Both controllers are great. I like them both. I use them both frequently. Back when I first compared like this to the Tribute 64, my favorite pick then was the Retro Fighters. I think since then I've grown to really love the Tribute 64 more. I think it's more feature rich as a controller, and I like the design of the buttons a little more. It really emulates the feel of an N64 controller's buttons. That part it like nails. If the two could combine, if I had like this ergonomic design with the Tribute 64's buttons, analog stick, and built-in vibration, it'd be the greatest N64 controller ever made. If these got some kind of firmware update though, to let them swap the triggers, these would be really close to perfection, and I would just adore these controllers. I like them already, and I use them. This is what I'm normally using when I'm playing N64 now, but the Tribute 64 is a beast of a controller, very good. Either way you go, you won't go wrong. They're both fantastic controllers. So that is these controllers kind of summed up. Hope this was kind of helpful and informative and kind of giving a basic breakdown of what both of these controllers have to offer. As I said many times, they're both great options. Whether you're doing wired or wireless, they have their conveniences and quirks. I think at the end of the day, I'm definitely a wireless guy. I use the Retro Fighters Brawler 64 wireless controllers all the time for stuff that I do for the channel. The wired one's fun and all. I doubt that I'll see myself using this one regularly, but if I'm going to break out the Rumble Pack, it's the one to go for, so I may start using it a little more frequently now that I have the option to. So, thank you so much for watching. If you found the video helpful or informative, please consider subscribing. Have a good rest of your day.